So, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Juliette Chevalier. I'm a software engineer, and I also teach programming at coding bootcamps, schools, workshops, things like this. And something I've noticed is that software engineer is going through a phase where a lot of our methodologies and our processes are sort of permeating into other spheres of the world. One of them, of course, being education. Now, before we get to that, before Scrum and schools can actually have a baby, they need to first start flirting. So, how did they even meet in the first place? And I think we've all sort of seen this picture and been there at the same time, right? We see kids who are energetic, curious, they want to eat the world. And yet, we as teachers constantly have them, just passively learning, forcing them to be sitting in their seat, writing stuff down, giving them instructions that often seem confusing. And especially, in this age of information abundance, there are two things that are happening all the time. So number one, as teachers and adults are explaining what they learned back in their day, more than over than not, that information is already being either posted online or becoming irrelevant as the pace of things are speeding by. The other thing that's happening is that teachers are competing for this kid's education with content creators, right? So we have people on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, who are all providing value that these kids are not only, scrolling down and enjoying, but they're actually choosing to see and read. And so in this fight, the truth is that content creators are winning for the kids' attentions with their concise, short, and engaging content. And I think a great example of these are Legos, right? So Legos back in the day used to come with only an instruction set that looks like this. And you had mountains of little, all these little toys that you could use, but you only had this page, which was more like ideas of the things that you could build with the toys that you had. Whereas Lego figured out that if they actually provided a more thorough piece of instruction set and information, where they would detail exactly what kids should be doing at every step of the way to build amazing cars, then they would sell a lot more. And, from an economic perspective, that's fine. But from an educational insight, what we're seeing is this trend where we're becoming more and more encouraging students to just follow information. They're just following instructions rather than teaching them how to think. And this problem is being reflective on our market immediately, right? Where we're seeing these headlines. This is as early as September 2021, so like last week, where everyone is hiring, but no one's getting hired. And of course, that means there's this huge disconnect between what kids and even higher education students are learning within the educational space and what the labor market requires due to the pace of how fast things are changing. And I think that's where, Scrum is in a bar, school is in a bar, sexy Scrum comes by with their promise of incremental value, constant feedback, iterations, short sprints. And what we see then is that they quickly fall in love. And as, any healthy relationship, as they start dating, the first thing that starts happening is that they set up this love contract, no? And here I think what we're often trying to ask is how can we provide education at scale that is personalized and that adapts to the fast changing state of the world while still entertaining up-to-date information and insights to the students, right? Which is clearly a super complex problem to solve. And so as you're trying to move forward, the contract means that we need to have information. We need to have a model that is adaptable, that is flexible, that is open for change, but that is also stable, so that students don't feel like they're, that they don't feel like they're in a chaotic environment that's often, without order, or they're confused about what they're learning and why. But then it also needs to be personalized and unique and tailored to how each student learns and how each student's interests and skills, while also being scalable so that it's accessible to everyone and that it's not super expensive because you're creating an entire school for each kid. And so what ends up happening is that we go through our first sprint, which is coding bootcamps. I really do think coding bootcamps have set up sort of a new trend in this education space, because they came in with a very sexy promise, right? You go in 9 weeks or 6 months, however long it takes, and all of a sudden you are able to go into the software engineering space, often earning, salaries of $100,000 or more. And so there's this first model that's playing on the modular, the flexible, the constantly up to date and iterating, and very much project-based peer-to-peer. I personally did a coding bootcamp, and I remember how stressful this was, right? It's a very intense experience. You're working from 50 to 80 hours a week. You're doing, almost 150 hours of prep work. You're basically quitting your job or quitting a semester just to enroll in this program. And what ends up happening is that you leave, all of a sudden you're done, and you look back and it's like, wow, how much did I just learn, and how much do I now know that I don't know, right? And so another, sexy model of coding bootcamps that have popped up is the income sharing agreements, where these programs offer students to take these courses for free, as long as they pay back whenever they earn that high-paying salary at a job. And of course, this is very seductive, because there are bootcamps even promising that they place even 99% of their students within these jobs. And we see a market cap that is currently only on the increase. I think it's like 700% increase meant to be on 2030, which is, I think, pretty crazy. And what ends up happening is that the teaching and how we're learning is evolving. From a bootcamp perspective, as strategy, we see different growth strategies. So it's either you grow in class size, or maybe you grow in modalities. So you can teach online and in person. You can teach full-time or part-time. You can expand to new cities. And then you could even expand to recruitment shops and consulting firms and upskilling B2B models. And so as bootcamps become so successful within this space, what we've now seen, and I think this is the stage where we're currently at, is all of these alternative bootcamps that are coming up. So these are bootcamps that are now no longer necessarily coding, but maybe data science, which is fairly similar. And then you're also taking another space of the technical career with like UX UI design, or you're going into digital marketing. And check it out. This one is by a university itself. Or you're even just going so far off into like public speaking. I've seen boot camps for pregnant women to better know their bodies and their pregnancies and how they're going to deliver. I've seen boot camps for writing. And so all of these different models are coming up, and they've become so successful in their learning strategies that they've even permeated now into the kids' learning. And so you have models like synthesis, where kids are going through these crazy simulations in order to solve art theft or the conquering of another planet and things like this. And they're actually learning to problem solve in complex environments. We see a similar thing in primer, where kids are getting together in kid-designed rooms to talk about music, coding, writing, all of these sorts of topics, robotics, video games, right? The topics that kids are interested in and how they're building their own clubs around their own interests. and even Nuvu Academy, which is basically a high school like a boot camp for kids. And so what's interesting is that I think we're now sort of reaching that engagement marriage stage where we're creating a model that can work like this in a lifelong basis, right? So it's no longer for one particular subject, it's no longer for one particular age group, but rather we can see this span throughout as a lifelong learning model. Because we can't just pretend that we can do 12 years of school early on and then have that be it with the fast-paced changing of the world. And so this lifelong model takes on some categories. And the way I probably, imagine it in my brain is that it could start as early on as I am in high school, and I can take, for example, a coding bootcamp. And then with some of my colleagues, I spend 2 or 3 more months building projects, assessing, grounding my skills, seeing what I like within the coding sphere. And then once I've tried that out on a very, entrepreneurial basis, then I hop on to the next one. And so I say, oh, I actually didn't like coding as much. I actually like design. And so I'll hop into a modular course of design where I'm learning project-based, peer-to-peer, contextual to what I like and to what my surroundings are like. And then I can move on to either deeper into UX or I can go into more graphic design. And so we see a model where these programs are constantly running. And what we structure is the path that the students can take to learn those skills in a deeper way. And so that means that when we get into the baby stage, what we're seeing is really a reflection of something that I predict will keep happening on most industries, which is how we're grabbing these agile concepts, not necessarily, I guess, Scrum itself or Kanban or agile entirely, but what we're grabbing is what works to create stability within this ever fast changing pace of the world. And we're grabbing these principles that were first, envisioned for software development, and we're passing them on to education. So, for example, rather than satisfying the customer, we want to satisfy the student and have the student work in a diverse environment enough where they can build, cross-functional teams for the projects that they're building and embrace the knowledge and learn from that diversity. We're building space of trust and support within the classroom so that students feel free to innovate and go for crazy ideas because they know that if they don't hit the rock within the first few weeks, they'll be moving on to the next sprint onto something else. We're using technology as an asset. And I think this is super interesting because it's not only the asset that technology provides, but really the frameworks that working in technology enable within this whole other set of industry that usually has gotten very much lagged behind. We're creating things that should feel simple. They shouldn't be complex. They shouldn't be stressed about and confused because they don't understand the learning. They're being agents of their own learning journey. They're crafting their own path of what they want to learn based on their interests and their skills. And that's where the student agency really pops up. Where it should be always learning, always iterating, less textbooks, more peer-to-peer. I think we've all, been in that Friday beers bar where we're learning more from our peers than potentially what we learned in a given class. And so that peer-to-peer conversation is crucial to make sure that the knowledge is trusted and grounded. I think this happens often within our careers. It's one thing for me to have as a mentor or as a role model someone that's so far off, a Jeff Bezos. Whereas if I have someone that's just a few steps ahead of me, I'm more able to grow in a faster way. And so that peer-to-peer connection is super crucial, whereas the teacher should be sort of more the facilitator, the guide that supports their learning, but it's really that peer-to-peer agency that's moving the information forward. We have a continuous attention to technical excellence. I think right now we're sort of grabbing the opposite in education where we're telling kids no computers in classrooms, no phones in classrooms. And really that's just avoiding reality. Like they come out and then they're engaged in these powerful, beautiful machines that can create, most of what we do we do in our day nowadays. And so really it's inevitable that they're going to be engaged. And teaching them how to use them properly and for the best is, it's a benefit for humanity, really. And so having, of course, this sprint-paced workflow enables the learning to be compounded as it's modular. And of course, after each sprint, we really think through what went right, what went wrong, and what could have gone better. And so I think why this should matter to all of us is because number one, we've all been in the education system. So even if we're not teachers or currently students, we've all been through those struggles. And if you have kids or if you decide to go back into education, you'll definitely see what the current traditional structure is like and how it's not, especially if you're an engineer, what we've been taught to learn like. Engineers work peer-to-peer, we solve problems, we're constantly learning new things and researching. And these are tactics that, as you can for sure perceive, are no longer not only useful within software engineering, but are really skills for every problem that you're trying to solve throughout life. And so, a big question I keep asking myself is, how do we make this education sustainable? How do we make this lifelong learning in a way where it doesn't feel off? Then I go to school for 12 years, then block another 4 for university, potentially block another 2 for masters. Then I actually start working. And then I figure out that all of what I studied, I actually didn't like. And so at that point, I'm basically screwed or having to, research on my own, pivot, potentially take one of these courses. And so what we have is a broken model in the sense that the purpose of education is teaching people to work where they want to work. And that model is definitely not fulfilling the expectations. So that is where my brain is currently at. That's my little baby. And I'll now take any questions you may have.